In this video, we will talk about initialization blocks, static initialization block, and instance initialization block, or init blocks in short. So what are these? Basically, we know that we have seen the static keyword uh, in case of variables and in methods, but this is the third use of static keyword, which is to create static init blocks. So we know that static exists before the object. Now initialization block is to do some initialization tasks. So let's say if we have to do something before the constructor gets called, before we can create an object, then we do that sort of thing in the static blocks. And we know that static belongs to the class, not to the object. So it will be common for all the objects. So any initialization thing that we need to do only once at the class level, not for all the objects. So we can do those things in the static init block. So for example, we have to create a costly DB connection and we don't want to do it again and again for all the instances, or any time when we create a new object. We want to avoid that. We want to do it only once. So we can put that logic in the static init block and it will be called exactly once for all the objects. How does it look like? So we create a static init block like this. We use the word static, then curly braces. So if you notice, there are no access modifiers, there is no return type, just like methods, no parentheses, no arguments, nothing, simply static and curly braces. This set of curly brace basically defines the scope of this init block. So anything that we declare here, let's say a new example 0, then this is specific to this init block. We cannot use it in other block, for example, something like that. Everything else remains the same related to the scope. It's just the syntax that it doesn't have any access modifier or the parentheses or the return type. Similarly, the thing is we can have as many static blocks as we want in the code, but they will be executed in the order they are there in the source code. So here this block will be executed first because it appears first, and then this block. So their placement in the class file or in the Java file defines their order of execution. Similarly, we have also instance initialization blocks. Anything that we want to do before the constructor, but for each object, we can put that in the simple init blocks, non-static. So if we see, it has nothing, it doesn't even have the static, just the curly braces, and we have two init blocks. Just for the clarity, we will say this is static init block 1 and this is static init block 2. Then we have instance init block 1 and 2. So that's how we write instance init blocks and static init blocks. And again, their order is basically in which order they are written in the source code. So it will be called first and it will be called second. But how about the ordering between static and instance? Will we see, if we run this program, will we see the output something like static block 1, then instance block 1, then static block 2, then instance block 2? We will see that. But, and then we have a print message in the constructor. Here in the main class, we are creating the object demo d equals to new demo. And if we if we run the main class, let's see what will we see on the console and in which order. So we see first of all the static blocks in the order, static block 1 and static block 2. Then we see instance blocks in the order, instance block 1, block 2, and constructor called. So we understand the sequence a bit more because we know that static do not belong uh, to the objects. Static blocks, they belong to the class, so they will be executed first before any instance block, before any instance initialization, before constructor. So static blocks will always be called first and in the order. So we see static block 1 and static block 2. Then when the Java will create the instance before it completes the constructor, it will see that there are instance blocks. So it calls instance blocks in the same order, block 1 and block 2. Then it completes the constructor execution and we see the constructor message in the end. And at this stage, we have an active object. All right. Now, if we create another object, demo d1 equals to new demo of the same class, and let's put a separator here so that we see things clearly on the console. So we see this is for the object number 1, then the separator, and then this is for the object number 2 that we are creating. So when we are creating the second object, we don't see the static blocks anymore. We see the instance init blocks in the order block 1, block 2, then the constructor, but we don't see the static anymore. And that's the idea. Because static variables or static things, they belong to the class, so they will be initialized or they will be loaded only once when the class is being loaded by the JVM. And that's what we want, right? We don't want static block to be executed every time for each object. Otherwise, we will write an instance block because we want to do it only once at the class level. That's why we are using static block, and that's why we don't see the static block getting executed second time when we are creating a new object, but only the instance blocks and constructor because that is specific to the constructor. So that's how we use in static init blocks and instance init blocks, and we learned their order of execution. That should be it for now. Thank you.